It was just another busy morning in the financial district when Mark, a successful businessman worth millions, noticed something that made him stop in his tracks. A small boy was sitting on the sidewalk, his feet bare despite the autumn chill. What caught Mark's attention wasn't just the boy's lack of shoes, but the quiet dignity in his eyes. There was no begging, no plea for help, just a child trying to survive another day. Without thinking twice, Mark approached the boy, who seemed startled by the attention from someone in such an expensive suit. "Aren't your feet cold?" Mark asked, crouching down to the child's level. The boy nodded slightly, his eyes wary but curious. Mark didn't hesitate. He walked into the nearest shoe store, still in his socks, drawing curious stares from other customers. He emerged minutes later with a complete set: sturdy shoes, warm socks, and even a winter jacket. The boy's eyes widened in disbelief as Mark handed him the package. "These are really for me?" he asked in a voice barely above a whisper. Mark nodded, feeling an unexpected lump in his throat as he watched the child carefully opening the box, treating it like the treasure it was. As the boy tried on his new shoes, Mark introduced himself and learned that the child's name was Sam. Sam revealed that he lived with his sister Emma at a nearby shelter after their mother had been hospitalized. "We're going to be okay, though," Sam said with surprising confidence. "Emma takes good care of me, and I take care of her too." Something about Sam's words struck Mark deeply. Here was a child with every reason to feel sorry for himself, yet his thoughts were focused on his sister. Mark sat beside Sam on the bench as he admired his new shoes, asking gentle questions about his life. Sam shared that Emma, barely 14 herself, worked odd jobs after school to keep them fed. Mark felt a strange mix of emotions: admiration for these children's resilience, anger at a system that had failed them, and an unfamiliar urge to do something meaningful beyond writing a check to charity. He wrote his personal number on the back of his business card and pressed it into Sam's small hand. "If you need anything at all, call this number," he said before reluctantly heading to his meeting. As he walked away, Mark couldn't shake the image of the boy's face. For the first time in years, he felt something shift inside him. A perspective that had been clouded by balance sheets and profit margins suddenly cleared. The next day, drawn by a force he couldn't quite name, Mark returned to the same spot. Sam was there, his face lighting up at the sight of his new friend. But to Mark's surprise, the boy's feet were once again bare, despite the cold autumn air. Before Mark could ask what had happened, Sam explained with pride, "I gave the shoes to Emma. She had a job interview today, and her old shoes had holes. You should have seen her face when I gave them to her." Mark stood frozen, stunned by the child's selflessness. Here was a boy who had received perhaps the first new thing in his life, and without hesitation, he had given it away. "Your sister must be very special," Mark said, feeling his throat tighten with emotion. Sam nodded eagerly. "She's the smartest person I know. She's gonna be somebody important someday." Mark couldn't walk away this time. He asked Sam if he could meet Emma when she returned from her interview. As they waited, he bought Sam another pair of shoes, this time making him promise to keep them for himself. "Your sister wouldn't want your feet to be cold," he reasoned, and Sam reluctantly agreed, though his eyes sparkled with joy at having a second chance at new shoes. When Emma arrived later that afternoon, Mark was struck by her protective instincts. She immediately placed herself between Mark and her brother, eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice steady despite her obvious fatigue. Mark admired her fierce protection of Sam, introducing himself and explaining how they'd met. Sam jumped in excitedly, telling her about Mark's kindness. Emma's stance softened slightly, though the wariness never fully left her eyes. "Thank you for helping my brother," she said formally. "And thank you for the shoes. Did you get the job?" Sam asked eagerly, looking at his sister with such admiration that Mark felt his heart clench. Emma's tired face broke into a small smile. "I think so," she said, ruffling her brother's hair. "They said they'd call tomorrow." Mark watched their interaction, seeing in their bond something pure and powerful. Despite having so little, they had something many of his wealthy associates seemed to lack: an unshakable connection to what truly mattered. As they talked, Mark learned more about their situation and felt an unfamiliar but undeniable pull to become more involved in their lives. The more Mark learned about Emma and Sam, the more his admiration grew. Despite their dire circumstances, both children were still attending school. Emma had been doing everything possible to keep them together, terrified that social services might separate them if they knew two children were essentially living on their own while their mother was hospitalized. "Mom will get better," Emma said with fierce determination. "We just need to hold on until then." Mark saw in her eyes the same strength he had once had, the drive that had propelled him from his own humble beginnings to tremendous success. But somewhere along the way, he had lost something these children still possessed, a clarity about what truly mattered. Looking at them, he felt both humbled and inspired. Without fully realizing what he was doing, Mark made a decision that would change not only their lives but his own. "I want to help," he said simply. Emma's defensiveness immediately returned. "We don't need charity," she said sharply. Mark shook his head. "It's not charity. It's an investment in potential." He explained that he had started with nothing himself, that someone had once given him a chance, and that he wanted to do the same for them. Emma remained skeptical, but the mention of her mother's medical bills made her hesitate. Mark could see the internal struggle, her pride fighting against her practical need to care for her family. "Just let me make some calls about your mother's treatment," he suggested. "No strings attached. If you don't want more help after that, I'll respect your decision." After a long moment, Emma gave a single, tight nod. That small gesture of trust was the beginning of something none of them could have predicted. Mark left that evening with a strange feeling in his chest, something like purpose, something like hope. The next morning, Mark made calls from his corner office, rescheduling meetings to the confusion of his secretary. For the first time in years, the business deals that had consumed his life seemed less important than helping these two children. He arranged for their mother to receive specialized care at the best hospital in the city. He found them temporary housing near the hospital so they could visit her daily. Emma did get the weekend job she interviewed for, but Mark persuaded her to cut back her hours. "Your job right now is to be a student," he insisted. "Let me handle the rest." Emma's independence made her reluctant to accept help. "We're not a charity case," she said firmly during one of their conversations. Mark respected her stance. "This isn't charity," he replied. "This is one human being helping another. Someday, you'll do the same for someone else." Slowly, Emma began to trust him, allowing herself to hope for a future that had seemed impossible just weeks before. She was brilliant, Mark discovered, top of her class despite everything she was dealing with. Sam, too, showed remarkable resilience and intelligence, soaking up knowledge like a sponge once his basic needs were met. What started as a chance encounter transformed into a mission. Mark's employees were surprised to see their hard-driving boss suddenly taking personal days and rushing out for what he called important meetings that had nothing to do with business. He used his connections to set up a foundation for children in similar situations, with Emma eventually providing input on what kids like her and Sam truly needed. The foundation didn't just offer material support but mentorship, educational opportunities, and family services. Mark's business associates were puzzled by his new passion. But those who knew him best said he seemed more alive, more purposeful than he had in years. As for Sam, the boy who had given away his first pair of new shoes without a second thought, he continued to show the same generous spirit in everything he did. One day, while helping distribute supplies at the new foundation, Sam approached Mark with a serious expression. "When I grow up," he said, "I want to be just like you, helping kids who don't have enough." Mark knelt down to look the boy in the eyes. "You already are helping, Sam," he replied softly. "You helped me remember what's important." The change in Mark didn't go unnoticed in his corporate world. At a board meeting, one of his oldest colleagues pulled him aside. "What's gotten into you lately, Mark? You seem different." Mark considered the question carefully. How could he explain that a shoeless boy had shown him what his millions couldn't buy? "I found something I lost along the way," he finally answered. His colleague looked confused, but Mark just smiled. The truth was, he had rediscovered his humanity in the most unexpected place, on a cold street corner where a child with nothing had taught him the value of everything. The foundation continued to grow, helping hundreds of children and families find stability and hope. But for Mark, its greatest achievement would always be the two siblings who had started it all, Emma with her fierce determination and Sam with his generous heart. Their mother's health improved with proper care, and the family was reunited in an apartment Mark helped them secure. Emma excelled in school, earning a scholarship to college where she studied social work. Sam, too, flourished under the stability and opportunities now available to him. He never forgot where he came from, though, often volunteering with other children at the foundation. Mark found himself changing in ways he never expected. The ruthless business tactics that had built his fortune no longer satisfied him. He began implementing ethical business practices even when they cut into profits, focusing on sustainable growth and employee welfare. Some board members grumbled, but the company's reputation soared, attracting talented people who shared his values. "You can do well by doing good," became his new business philosophy. And when questioned about his transformation, he would simply mention a pair of shoes, leaving most puzzled but a few intrigued enough to follow his example. Years later, Mark stood at the back of an auditorium, watching with pride as Emma delivered the valedictorian speech at her college graduation. "Life isn't about what you have," she told her fellow graduates, "but about what you give. Sometimes the people who seem to have the least to give are the ones who teach us the most about generosity." Her eyes found Mark in the crowd, and they shared a smile that acknowledged their journey. Beside him sat Sam, now a teenager with dreams of becoming a doctor, and their mother, healthy and proud. What had begun with a simple pair of shoes had transformed not just 3 lives, but countless others touched by the Foundation's work. At the Foundation's 5th anniversary celebration, Emma, now a confident young woman, gave a speech that moved everyone to tears. "People often say that Sam and I were saved by a millionaire's kindness," she said, her voice strong and clear. "But that's only half the story. The truth is that 3 lives were saved that day: Sam's, mine, and Mark's." The audience applauded, but Mark barely noticed, his attention fixed on the siblings who had become like family to him. He thought about the incredible journey that had started with a simple choice to stop and notice a shoeless boy. He thought about all the lives touched since then, not just the hundreds of families directly helped by the Foundation, but the countless others affected by the ripple effects of compassion set in motion that day. The Foundation's impact continued to grow beyond what anyone could have predicted. What began as one man's spontaneous response to a child's bare feet evolved into a movement that changed an entire community. Other business leaders, inspired by Mark's transformation, began similar initiatives in their own cities. Emma's research in college focused on creating better support systems for families in crisis. Sam, with his natural empathy, became the Foundation's most effective young ambassador, connecting easily with children who saw themselves in his story. Mark often reflected on how different his life might have been if he had simply walked past that shoeless boy on that autumn morning. "The best investment I ever made," he would say, "was a pair of shoes that were given away twice." None of them could have foreseen how a single moment of connection, a wealthy man noticing a poor child, would create ripples that continued to spread outward, touching countless lives and proving that sometimes the greatest gifts come from the most unexpected sources. And in quiet moments, Mark would remember the lesson Sam had taught him, that true wealth had nothing to do with bank accounts and everything to do with the capacity to give. The media eventually caught wind of their story, with journalists eager to interview the millionaire whose life had been changed by a shoeless boy. Mark was reluctant at first, uncomfortable with being portrayed as a hero when he felt he had gained far more than he had given. "If you want to write about heroes," he told one persistent reporter, "write about Emma and Sam, about how they never gave up on each other or their mother, about how they maintained their dignity and compassion despite having every reason not to." The reporter took his advice, and the resulting article focused not on Mark's charity but on the extraordinary resilience and generosity of the siblings. The story went viral, touching hearts across the world and inspiring similar initiatives in other cities. Letters poured in from people sharing their own experiences of unexpected kindness, each one reinforcing what Mark had learned, that the most profound connections often occur when we're brave enough to step outside our comfort zones. What none of them expected was how the story would change the lives of others who heard it. A wealthy real estate developer read about the Foundation and donated an entire apartment building to house families in transition. A medical group offered free care to children in the program. Volunteers from all walks of life came forward, wanting to be part of something meaningful. Emma's college professors were so impressed by her dedication that they helped her secure grants for her research into improving social services for vulnerable families. Sam, growing into a thoughtful teenager, began speaking at schools about the importance of compassion and resilience. And Mark found himself mentoring other successful businesspeople who wanted to use their resources for good but didn't know where to start. "Start by seeing people," he would tell them. "Really seeing them. The rest will follow." His simple advice, born from his experience with Sam, became the Foundation's unofficial motto, See the person, not the circumstance. And in boardrooms across the city, decisions began to be made with human impact in mind, not just profit. One cold winter morning, almost exactly 5 years after their first meeting, Mark and Sam returned to the street corner where it all began. Sam, now a teenager wearing warm boots and a fashionable jacket, smiled as he looked at the spot where he had once sat with bare feet. "I can hardly believe that was me," he said quietly. Mark put a hand on his shoulder. "That boy changed my life," he replied. Sam looked up, his eyes still holding that same wisdom that had first caught Mark's attention. "And that man changed mine," he said simply. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the busy people rush by, most of them unaware that this ordinary street corner had been the birthplace of something extraordinary. A businessman hurried past, his eyes focused on his phone, nearly bumping into a young mother struggling with a stroller. Sam watched as the man didn't even look up. "Some people never see," he said softly. Mark nodded. "But once you do see, really see, you can never unsee again." As if to prove his point, Sam walked over to the mother and helped her navigate the stroller down the curb. Mark watched with pride, knowing that the boy's generosity wasn't something he had taught him, it was something Sam had taught him. They continued their walk, discussing plans for a new initiative to provide job training for parents at the shelter. To anyone passing by, they might have looked like father and son. In many ways that mattered most, they were. The relationship between Mark, Emma, and Sam defied traditional definition. They were not bound by blood, but by something perhaps even stronger, by choice, by shared values, by the knowledge that each had profoundly changed the others. When Emma married a fellow social worker, both Mark and Sam stood with her family at the wedding. When Sam graduated from university, Mark and Emma cheered as loudly as his mother. And when Mark received a humanitarian award for his foundation work, he insisted that Emma and Sam join him on stage. "Nothing I've accomplished would have been possible without these two," he told the audience. "They taught me that true wealth has nothing to do with money." The three formed an unlikely family, brought together by a pair of shoes and bonded by a shared vision of a world where no child would go without basics like shoes, shelter, or the chance to build a future. Their story became legend within the foundation, shared with new families as a reminder that help could come from unexpected places and that everyone, regardless of circumstances, had something valuable to offer others. The lesson of the shoes continued to shape all their lives in unexpected ways. When Emma was offered a prestigious position at a private agency, she surprised everyone by turning it down. Instead, she chose to work directly with children in the shelter system. "The suits can wait," she explained. "These kids can't." Her choice echoed Sam's long-ago gift, giving up something valuable for something more important. Sam, following his sister's example of prioritizing education, earned a scholarship to a top university. On his first day on campus, he noticed a fellow student wearing shoes held together with duct tape. Without drawing attention, Sam later left a new pair outside the student's door with a simple note, "Pass it on when you can." The student never knew where the shoes came from, but years later, as a successful engineer, he would remember that kindness and start a program providing professional clothes for job interviews in low-income communities. And so the ripple continued, one act of kindness inspiring another in an endless chain reaction. Mark's perspective on wealth had been permanently altered by his encounter with Sam. He still lived comfortably but with far less extravagance than before. His colleagues were baffled when he turned down a lucrative merger that would have doubled his fortune but potentially eliminated jobs. "There's enough," he explained simply. "And more isn't always better." At 60, he made the surprising decision to step back from his company, turning over leadership to a team that shared his values of corporate responsibility. He devoted himself full-time to the foundation, which had expanded to include not just emergency assistance but systemic change, lobbying for better policies, working with schools to identify vulnerable children earlier. On the 10th anniversary of their first meeting, the foundation held a celebration, not a lavish gala as might be expected, but a community day at a local park. Children played on swings and slides, families shared meals at picnic tables, and volunteers distributed backpacks filled with school supplies. In one corner, a simple display told the story of how it all began, with a boy who gave away his shoes. Standing slightly apart from the crowd, Mark watched as Sam, now a young man of 20, helped a small girl try on a new pair of sneakers. The girl's face lit up with the same joy Sam had shown a decade earlier, and Mark felt his heart swell with emotion. Emma joined him, following his gaze to her brother. "You know," she said softly, "before you came along, I thought the world was divided into two kinds of people, those who had enough and didn't care, and those who didn't have enough and couldn't change it." Mark turned to her. "And now?" Emma smiled, watching as Sam sent the little girl running to show her mother her new shoes. "Now I know better. The world is full of people who can change each other's lives, sometimes with something as simple as a pair of shoes." As they stood there together, Mark realized that this was his true legacy, not the buildings bearing his name or the fortune in his accounts, but the lives changed because he had stopped one day to notice a shoeless boy. And he knew without a doubt that it was the best investment he had ever made. Have you ever wondered what kind of impact your daily choices might have on others? This story shows us that even the smallest gestures can create waves of positive change. Think about the moments when someone's unexpected kindness changed your perspective or gave you hope during a difficult time. Now imagine being that person for someone else. What would it look like to step outside your comfort zone and really see the people around you? How might your life change if you started measuring success not by what you accumulate but by the difference you make? These questions aren't just philosophical, they're practical invitations to transform your own life by transforming others. The foundation that grew from Mark's encounter with Sam has now helped thousands of families, but it all started with one person choosing to stop and notice another's need. We all have this power, to truly see others, to recognize their inherent value beyond their circumstances. Maybe you can't fund a foundation or provide housing for families in need, but you can offer something just as meaningful: your attention, your respect, your belief in someone's potential. Remember that Sam's greatest gift wasn't material. It was showing his sister that she mattered more to him than anything he could possess. And Mark's greatest gift wasn't financial. It was his willingness to truly see two children who had been invisible to most of the world. So today, as you go about your life, challenge yourself to really look at the people around you. Who might be struggling silently? Whose potential might be waiting to be recognized? What small act of kindness might you perform that could set in motion changes you can't even imagine? The truth is, we never know how far the ripples of our actions will spread. That pair of shoes didn't just warm Sam's feet for a day, it sparked a movement that changed countless lives. Your kindness could do the same. Don't underestimate the power of seeing someone, really seeing them, and responding with compassion. It might be the most important thing you ever do. If this story has touched you, don't just click away and forget it. Let it change how you move through the world today. Notice the people around you who might be invisible to others. Listen to their stories. Find ways, big or small, to show them they matter. And remember that sometimes the greatest gifts we can give cost nothing at all: our attention, our respect, our belief in someone's potential. Like and subscribe to stay connected with more stories that remind us of our shared humanity and the power we all have to make a difference. Turn on notifications so you never miss a chance to be inspired. And share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that even in our divided world, connection and compassion are still changing lives every day, one pair of shoes at a time.